Welcome to the Lavish Leader, Unveiling Wisdom, a podcast by the Lavish Group. We are a community of powerful leaders and creators. Each one of us is on a different path and from a different background, but we all embody aspects of what it means to truly live a lavish life. And we are here to share our stories. I'm your host, Dr. Erin Martin. Welcome, everyone, to Lavish Conversations. Today, we have a very special guest, as all of my guests are very special. This is one who has me already smiling from ear to ear because I know that this is going to be such a magical conversation. This is Dr. Sue Morter today. And let me tell you about Dr. Sue. She's going to sit there and just soak in all of her accomplishments. Dr. Morter is an international speaker, a master of bioenergetics theory, and quantum field visionary. She utilizes the embodiment of high-frequency energy patterns to activate full human potential. Through her seminars, retreats, and presentations, she illuminates the relationship of quantum science and energy medicine, which is elevating human consciousness into life mastery. And we are going to talk about what all of that means. Dr. Sue is the USA Today bestselling, #1 bestselling LA Times, and #1 Amazon bestselling author of The Energy Codes, the 7-step system to awaken your spirit, heal your body, and live your best life. Through the Energy Codes, Dr. Sue provides techniques to activate untapped energy and neurocircuitry in the body, empower hidden potential, and become one's true essential self. She is the founder and creator of the globally taught coursework, The Energy Codes, which is a multi-level body of work on personal and spiritual development. She also created Body Awake, an RYT 200 certified yoga program, and is the co-creator of the bioenergetic synchronization technique known as BEST. She has served on professional licensing boards, provides guidance to healthcare practitioners on integrative approaches to healthcare leadership, and is also adjunct faculty at 2 medical schools, including Michigan State University. She is the host of Gaia TV's Healing Matrix and co-host of Your Year of Miracles lifestyle training. So amongst many, many other things, she is an honored member of the Transformational Leadership Council. I can't even say all of the wonderful things that she has accomplished. So welcome, Dr. Sue.
Great joy to be here. So I'll try to live up to that stuff. See what we can do.
Yeah, sometimes we just go for it and we look back and we're like, whoa, I did all that.
I know. I never even oh, wow, what an inventory. Okay, let's see what else we can do.
Yeah, well, your team absolutely just adores you. So I think they gave it all to us.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. All right. Well, welcome here. And we are going to have a very lavish conversation. And my intention and my hope for this conversation is that those listening will be able to come away with a deeper understanding and a real thought process around what health and healing truly, truly is. And it is really probably something very different than what they may be currently thinking. And I can say that as a Western medical doctor turned integrative medical practitioner and Ayurvedic practitioner and all of that, there is a big difference between what we think of healing, fixing, and what is actual true health. So first, I would love it if you could share with us your story, just to get to know you a little bit. What put you on the path of seeking these deeper truths in life and in becoming this leader in helping other people transform their health, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually as well, and to the place where you are now as a transformational leader?
Great question. So it's kind of twofold. Number one, I came upon it honestly in that I was born into a family where my father was a doctor, but he also was a pioneer in energy medicine. So he began working with bioenergetics in the 1970s. And at a time when energy and medicine would have never been used together in a sentence, much less as a modality or a way of looking at health and healing. So in short, what that means is I was raised in an environment where understanding the body's natural capacity and ability to heal was a way of being that I grew up with. And so quantum science and what became known as epigenetics was our dinner table conversation as I was growing up. It's just totally our thoughts create our reality. Our body responds to unresolved emotion in an unfavorable manner. An accumulation of unresolved emotion will shut down the energy flow in the body and the communication systems, and we get sick and we have a harder time getting well and so forth. So these were high school conversations for me. So I grew up in that. And I went to school, became a doctor, opened a clinic, was working with patients, and everything was going very well. And I started getting migraine headaches. And I started realizing that my headaches were becoming regular and I could help other patients that were coming in for their migraine headaches, but I was still getting them myself. And so became curious and I started listening to what I was telling my patients because their headaches were getting better and mine weren't. So it kind of strikes that vulnerable place where we know that something has to shift, something has to happen here. I was starting to miss work a day or two a week because of these headaches. I couldn't get out of bed, had to close the blinds, nobody could talk. It was pretty extreme in that way. And I was drawn to meditation. I somehow knew that meditation was going to be some sort of stress relief for me, is the impetus of how I entered into that world. And what happened was I began instantly having these unexplainable to my world at that time, traditional scientists trained as an outcomes clinician, et cetera. Meditation was over there, something that other people did. And yet I just felt pulled. And thank goodness I listened to the call, the pull in that direction. And I instantly started having transcendental experiences, multidimensional experiences. What that means is I closed my eyes one day and I lit up in a totally an additional and a new realm. I could see in every direction. I was in a light 10 times brighter than the brightest day in the desert that I had ever experienced. And I could see behind me and in front of me and beside and above and below the same at the same time. I had free will because I could decide where I was going to focus my attention. I was me, but I wasn't in a physical body. I was this ray of light. And I was embedded into the earth, which was beneath me so far. It was about the size of a marble. And I could feel myself embedded into it up to what would have been my knees, but I didn't have a physical body. I was me, but I wasn't in a body. And every time I took a breath, this beautiful pink, iridescent, translucent horizon would rise up and it would slowly fall back down to its resting place when I would exhale. And if I took a big breath, it would rise up and rest again. If I took a small breath, it would just rise in accordance with that. And oddly enough, I have to say that I knew that this light that I was in was becoming love as it passed through my system. And it was being kind of shipped down to this earthly experience version of us. And I knew that every single one of us was this. And what I would really love to share about it is that there was nothing broken. There was nothing wrong. There was nothing to fix. There was no one to become. There was nowhere to go and nothing to do. I was completely complete, just completely whole and satiated. And I knew that I had been there forever. There was this, oh, here we are. And what's that thing we're doing down there was an entirely new conversation now in my life. Blew my circuits, blew my mind. I had no idea what to do with this. It rattled me physically. I became such a high vibration, and we can talk about what that means, vibrating in my body after that, that I went down into bed for days trying to figure out who I was and where we were and what's really going on here, because it wasn't the way that it appeared my whole life leading up to this. So that was 24 years ago. And I spent the next 5 years after that trying to recreate that experience. Like, how did I get there? What happened? How did that work? And every time I would try something, it wouldn't work. And when I would stop trying, it would. And so, of course, okay, ingredient number one, stop trying. And then I would recreate some of the things that were happening. And little by little, I started to codify how that happened. And I was able to recreate my passageway into these other realms, which I know that you are familiar with as well, based on what I know about you. And I began to recognize that we have access to this direct connection, that everyone has it. And how we access it is unique to everyone, but we all have access because we're all made of the same thing. And so ultimately, at our very foundation, So while I was born into the open-minded conversation about such things, I had never experienced anything like this, nor did I know about these other realms or anything. And then it was a pain point in my life that drove me to seek, to discover, to find a world I wasn't familiar with at all. And then I had to trust it. I had to trust it because it was opening up something to me, into my life. My headaches went away. I healed a scoliosis in my spine as a byproduct of this. I was able to heal other things and injuries that would occur along the way in rapid time that made no sense because I was tapping and staying connected as this flow of consciousness that is here now residing in a body, sort of at the other end of that spectrum of what I had experienced that day. So it was a mind bender and it changed my life forever. I knew in that first moment that this was something I was never going to lay down and just walk away from and just kind of shake my head about. I became a living laboratory until I could put the pieces together enough to be able to help other people to do the same because it was making such a transformation in my life. So I'll stop there. All my answers won't be that long, but I just wanted to kind of set a context there. It's a wild ride, and I would never not do it again. It was exactly what the doctor ordered. And even though the doctor had no idea what that was about.
I think that when it comes to meditation, I mean, so many people talk about it, so many people try it. I remember learning about it in medical school. Specifically, I remember learning about the science of transcendental meditation, and that's been studied, and about this meditation in medical school. I remember learning about it again in residency. And when I did my integrative medicine fellowship, we definitely learned about it. I had a very thorough knowledge of all of the science that backed up this particular kind of meditation, yet I never tried. And here I was like head on, super stressed out, sleep deprived, doing all of these things and having to be on blood pressure medication because my blood pressure was so high and having anxiety and all of this and asking people for help, yet not trying the things that I knew could be helpful. And how you were saying that there's something that happens in your life that brings you to the point where you're like, I got to do something different. I've got to try this thing. Yeah. It wasn't until I had been practicing probably 15 years when my life got to the point where I was like, I have to do something for myself here. Nobody else is going to be able to help me. And I went and I finally got a teacher and I learned transcendental meditation. And I was like, almost mad at myself for waiting so long. And, we have to go through that, whatever it is that brings us to that point. But most people have a reason for beginning meditation. And what is available to us is on such a spectrum, everything from you get 10 minutes off from whatever it was that you were doing, all the way to
Right.
What you're talking about is like a spiritual awakening, like the secrets of the universe, right?
Exactly.
And you never know what you're going to get. And that's one of the reasons that from a childish perspective, why I go to the meditation seat every day, because I don't know what I'm going to get all the time. I can go in with an intention. And when I open myself and allow, all sorts of things can happen. And that's an exciting part for me for meditation. So I just wanted to share that with the audience.
I think that's sort of the magic, is that you don't know. And that you're willing to go without knowing is why it opens you to new realms or new versions of yourself, or just a greater sense of peace, or a deeper felt experience of self-love, or whatever is up for us in our own evolution at any given point in time. And the only way to actually receive more than you were anticipating is to not have an expectation, but to just go with sort of a devotional disposition that is filled with love and open-mindedness and a sense of caring for self and caring for life. And just being in that sort of disposition is one of the things that we don't get trained to do in our Western worlds. We don't get trained to value preciousness or something, a devoted, sacred sense of doing nothing. We don't get rewarded for doing nothing. We get rewarded for, yeah, she did this and she accomplished that, or he did this. And we're so focused on the doing part of life. But it's the receiving and the perceiving and listening and the making oneself available to a greater version of themselves that really allows healing to happen. So I just wanted to really just support what you were saying there and how important it is to go with this childlike innocence of like, I don't know, probably don't know what I'm doing. I had no idea what I was doing. And I know that's why it worked for me. And I had no idea that what was going to happen was even possible. I'm so glad I didn't know it was possible because I would have been trying to make it happen. And it was totally a different disposition, sort of the kind of disposition that we have when we say, oh, what the heck, I'm not even going to try. But that's usually jaded with apathy. If it was really colored with the volunteer surrender, it takes on a different vibration and it opens the doorway for us in a way that really allows us to discover a different version of who we are, differently than how most of our lives have been rewarded in most of the world. So the folks who are plugging in to this waking up moment in life.
I think we're kind of on the same wavelength here. And I think the other thing, just a little even deeper with that, is for people that do meditate, and I caught myself doing this just last week, is that we can go in with this idea that we're surrendering to something, and yet there's still this proving energy that we're having. Like, I'm going to get something out of this meditation. Like, I'm going to get an insight or a download, or I'm going to figure out what it is my next step for my business, or like whatever. Like, we're trying to pull in from outside of us, like something from the universe that is usable in our human life. And one of the things that I've really been working on for myself is, how do I use my will to prioritize receiving energy and receiving spaciousness, or just being in that spaciousness, and not thinking or trying to manipulate some sort of cosmic energy to give me something that I think that I want or I need, and just showing up in absolute surrender, in absolute receiving mode. And I think that as women, as successful women who are powerful, we're used to somehow getting something that is what validates our time. We got something from it. And I think that there's a feminine energy that is so wise here, that isn't about proving, it isn't about manipulating, it isn't about getting anything. It's just about allowing and being that vessel to receive something that it may be greater than anything that we could imagine, which sounds like what you experienced.
Definitely. And a surprising element to it in my life has been that it isn't only receiving, it is perceiving what is already here. It's allowing something to rise up from within. And the feminine energy is on the rise. The masculine energy is what descends, and the feminine energy is what catches and nurtures and cultivates and then becomes and births something and reveals. So if we're really focusing on allowing the greatest truth that we are to ever be known by our own minds, much less anyone else, but by our own minds, it's about also perceiving and appreciating what's in here, who's in here. What's underneath all these layers of personality that have been caked on for in terms of trying to fit in or do the right thing or show up or play smart and all that stuff. But underneath all of that is the one who came. Underneath all of that is this timeless version of self. And that, when we allow that to rise, when we create the space for that to just start to emerge, something so rich and beautiful takes over in our lives. We automatically have patience. We automatically have what we would call courage, but it doesn't feel courageous. It's just what's to do. I just don't have an option. It's me that's rising here, and I'm not going to not, because it's what's to reveal. And I think that if we could, as a species, tap in, and we can tap into that at large, we would actually be living and walking and talking as a wiser version of humanity. And I know that's what humanity is seeking. We're out there in the outer, battling it out between each other, trying to get what we think the other is trying to take, and all of this crazy that's happening, all in a birthing process of just surrendering and dropping in and having a deeper appreciation for the fact that we're made of the universe. We're made of everything that is. There's nothing that we're not. We're not missing anything. So it's just a matter of tending to it and giving it a place to really be cultivated and to birth itself. This is something that I like to add to these conversations about receiving and trying to get. Everyone's very interested in getting what they need, And that's why they don't ever experience their wholeness, because it automatically makes the assumption that I'm lacking something. I have to go get it. And that's the first lie right there. That's a lie. So anything that I do to pursue that is kind of a waste of time. Even stumble upon some things that make me feel better for a while. At the end of the day, it's never going to really accomplish a sense of fulfillment and a sense of self. It's right underneath the idea of I am whole, and I'm here to come to know that, come to discover my wholeness and listen and reveal and nurture and tend to that instead of strategizing on the next best way to go get more. It's an abundant way of living.
It is. It's an abundant way of living. It's a loving way of living. It's a lavish way of living. You're talking about embodiment. I'm sitting here thinking like, wow, there's like so many stars lighting up right here for me. Like which direction? There's so much here. And I think what I would love to talk about at this moment is, boy, what you just said was so beautiful. The being enough, the being complete as we are. And then that mastery of that knowing that you know that you're enough is an embodiment, and how we take that and how that we then show up to life and show up to the world and what's possible for us with that kind of knowing. What kind of wisdom I see you breathing in. Let's talk about that, because there's so much here when we talk about healing and self-development and personal development and coaching and all of this stuff that people are after for, yes, to somehow get better for themselves. And yet it is also assuming that there is something missing.
Yeah, I think if we could approach it like there isn't anything missing, I'm just not aware of all of the magnificence that I am. So I'm developing my ability to sense and perceive a greater truth within me. I'm pursuing a practice of personal development or a spiritual development or a self-healing modalities that I'm pursuing in some way, not so that I can fix something that's broken, but so that I can turn on some circuitry that has been sitting dormant, waiting for my attention to land on it. And as soon as my attention lands on it, it starts to enliven. That is what awareness does. And so what I like to do is to start with this conversation that everything is energy, including us. We, as pure consciousness, which is what we are energy that is awake. We are energy that is awake, that has lucid capacity to perceive. And we use our minds to focus what we're paying attention to focus our perceptive ability. And when we land here on this planet, we sort of splat and our attention goes outward. Like our mind goes one way, our body goes another way, and we're just like face plant. And we get up and we're like, did anybody see me splat, first of all? And then secondly, who do I go to figure out how to unfix this, to get unsplatted? And we basically we're kind of attached to the mind of all parts. And we're so attached to our mind that we can't get it off of us. And so we think we are that. But the mind's only a part of who we are. It's not the wholeness of us. But we start being identified as the mind. And the mind, because it's only part of who we are, it feels incomplete all the time. So whenever we have a thought that is something around the neighborhood of, I'm not enough, I'm incomplete, there's something I need, I can't do it myself, I'm not capable, those are the thoughts of the mind. And it's okay to have those thoughts. We just shouldn't believe them. We should just recognize, oh, there goes my mind again. And that's not me, that's just my mind. But when it's attached to me and I'm enmeshed in it, it feels like it's me. And so we're learning how to get this over here and actually get it serving us instead of controlling us, to get it serving us. Now there's a whole different ballgame going on. Now, think of it this way. The mind is designed to serve the soul, the deep spirit being. It's designed to serve that, not to control it, but to listen and steward it and do what it wants. We are the soulful self, and we invented a mind and a body to navigate through this physical world. That's really the chair we should be sitting in, but we're sitting in the wrong chair. And so everything looks distorted from that chair. So we're getting up out of that chair and sitting down in the seat of the soul, if you will, not to make it a religious conversation, but the essential self. You can interchange those words. The true self, the authentic self. That essential presence is energy that is awake. So when we get up out of that seat of the mind and sit down in this seat of the essential self, what happens is we feel a sense of completeness and wholeness. And as long as we're sitting over there in the seat of the mind, we feel like something's missing. Like I need another degree, or I need a different partner, or I need to move out of this town where everything is stale and nobody's going to get me, or whatever. We have all kinds of thoughts and pursuits like that. We pursue happiness. We pursue spirituality. We pursue a deeper meaning to life. And no, we just need to get up out of that seat and sit down where we really belong. And everything changes in an instant as soon as we start doing that. Now, we have to learn incrementally how to get over here and sit down and stay, because the mind wants to pull us right back up into our reflexive patterns and our habits and our beliefs and all those knee-jerk reactions that we have to life. But as soon as we see ourselves doing that, all we have to do is smile and be like, oh, I'm in the wrong seat again. I just got to get over here and sit down. And we will begin to develop a different life from this other seat. We'll begin to be rewarded for sitting there. And pretty soon then the subconscious is like, it takes less energy to sit over here. I don't have to strategize. I don't have to figure out what I'm going to do if this other person does that and this and that. And I can just do what I really feel. And my path unfolds in front of me. And it's graceful and it's sustainable and it's rejuvenating and passionate, and nothing like what I was experiencing when I was sitting over there in the seat of the mind. So it starts to build this rapport, if you will. And the subconscious now is like, okay, whatever, we'll know when we get there. We don't have to rehearse. We don't have to pre-plan. I mean, we can come up with visions and goals and dreams for our lives, of course, but we'll know how to have that unfold. We're not obsessed with how. We're really passionate about what or why, for that matter. So
you said the mind is designed to serve the soul. Yeah. And that is the underlying factor when we talk about, at least for me, the light bulb went off. Like when we talk about self-mastery, I've heard you talk about understanding where your body's speaking to you in terms of like in your body physically, the energetics of that, the chakras, and we'll talk about the energy codes here and stuff too. But when we are able to do that, and that allows us to have access to these other kind of realms of ourself that we are blind to. And we all have blind spots, right? We all have gifts and talents and superpowers and all of those things that we are unaware of because we've not accessed them yet. And when talking about this self-mastery, the mind is designed to serve the soul, of shifting that and us being in control of that rather than the other way around. And when I talk to women who are already super successful, they're powerful, they're leaders, they're already got it all on the outside, and there's something unfulfilled within them. And I talk to them about, we're not talking in the personal development world, they talk a lot about like, what's your next level, or let's up level. And I'm saying, we're not talking about what the next level is. We want to access the next plane. And what you're saying here is, I'm like, this is exactly the key, the doorway, the portal, whatever you want to call it, for accessing that next plane. I talk about being on the leading edge of the leading edge. And you are being a lighthouse for this. You really are. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about the energy codes. And you talk about them as a way of life. And we can't have these moments of insight and we've accessed something in ourselves and then we pull back. It's like when we cross a threshold, do we go back, or are we committed? Just has something fundamentally shifted in us that when we cross that threshold, there's no going back. We have access that higher plane. And maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but I'm wondering if you could talk with us about that and why this shift is important.
I think that once we awaken to a deeper version of ourselves, we cannot unknow that. We found it. It's like, oh, now what? You don't have to know what to do with it, but you'll never unknow it. You can act like and try to ignore it, but it's there now and it's lit up. They turned the lights on in a room that you didn't even know the room was there. So now you know there's this extra room in my house. So you can go and be busy in all the other rooms, but you're never going to forget that, oh my gosh, there's this deeper place in me. And just having awareness of it starts to create an energetic shift or a gathering of energies into that room. And it starts to build a sense of self that we didn't have before. When I mentioned earlier that we land and we splat, all of our circuitry gets oriented to the outer world. We're looking to this person to get their approval. Am I doing okay? Am I fitting in? Are you approving of me? Or are you okay? Because if you're not okay, then I'm probably not okay because my okayness depends on you. That we're just like written up that way. It
Yes.
isn't true, but it might as well be. We've developed that circuitry to the outer world. And so what I'm saying with the energy codes is it's a codified way of gathering yourself back from the splat and returning your attention inward, not in an egoic way, but in a personally responsible stewardship sort of way. Like I'm responsible for me. So I need to get to know me so that I can manage me appropriately. So not appropriately for your rules or his rules or her rules, but appropriately to really meet with the fulfillment of my destiny, the awakening of true self while I'm here on this planet, so that heaven and earth come together because I'm here. It's all one place. It's right here, right now, if I let it be. And so we have to learn how to do that. So in that, what we start to recognize is that when we're sitting over there in the seat of the mind and our circuits are all oriented for the external world, for approval, fitting in, doing the right thing, succeeding, getting the edge ahead of somebody else, all that stuff, we're asking the mind to do something it wasn't built to do. And that's run our lives. It's not built to do that. The soul, the deep core wisdom, the essential self, which we experience as authenticity, true self, my deep truth, that's what's supposed to be running our lives. And the mind just translates into English or Spanish or Portuguese or whatever, wherever, however it is needed to bring forth the desires of our deep core self, bring them forward and create a life based on that. So it's sort of like giving the soul a chance to have the life that it came here to have for the first time. But in the splat, the mind took over. So now we're no longer going to ask the mind to do something it wasn't built to do in the first place. We're going to allow the mind to have a team member to help it. The mind and the body working together are stronger than the mind alone. So I like to say it like this, that the soul speaks to the body and the body speaks to the mind. It's like rings on a tree. Like the deepest ring is the soulful presence inside, and it speaks to the body and the body speaks to the mind totally doesn't listen. The mind is just off doing its own thing, writing its stories, having
Like
a
having a
drama.
teenager.
Right, exactly. It's like, what? Did you say something? Right. Oh, that was just mom. I forget it. It's like that. And so we're saying, okay, mind, let's stop this runaway train. Let's get the mind to listen to the body. So we know that if we have a stomach ache, that it gets our attention. And we've learned that a stomach ache is associated with unresolved emotion or a knot in your stomach or tightness in your throat or upset gut there's a neuro-emotional relationship there that's undeniable in the research now, that we can worry ourselves into a headache. We can worry ourselves out of an appetite. We can worry ourselves into digestive problems, all sorts of things. So we know that relationship exists. And the same thing is true when a message is trying to be brought forward. In fact, when we ignore the message that's trying to be brought forward to the mind from the body, like a cramp in your gut, a knot in your stomach, or a lump in your throat, that's a message that's trying to come through. It's energy that's trying to express. And if the mind was trained to translate that message, and it can be trained to do that, it can be trained to do almost anything. As we train it to decipher the messages, we now have a team of body and mind working together. Like, I got it. A hunch. I got this gut feeling over here. I got this intuition. I'm going to go with this. I don't know why, but I'm going to go with this. I don't have evidence yet, but I got to do this. When we start to develop that sort of relationship between mind and body, gut, viscera, you name it, we're more empowered. There's more to us than what we were aware of just a moment before we started operating that way. So the energy codes are a codified way to teach somebody to train their mind to listen to what the body is revealing, because the body is revealing what the energy is trying to express, but the mind keeps concealing it. Like we take something so that we don't feel the upset stomach. We take something so that we don't feel the headaches. We go get busy so that we don't really have to pay attention to that thing in the solar plexus or whatever is happening. And it's like, it's not working, humanity, and we know it. And so we're curious, and here we are. We're in this conversation. We're interested in what's going on underneath that. So what's going on underneath that is your own evolution, if you let it be. And so when we start to get triggered about something, we start to get upset about something, the question that I invite people to ask that is a better question than, why do you keep doing that? Because you know it upsets me, but why do you keep doing that? They keep doing it because that's what they're doing. And you actually probably had some kind of soulful contract with them to keep doing it until you just went crazy enough that you stopped trying to change them and you started paying attention to yourself, right? It's like we have a whole process about that. But in the moment when it's actually happening, instead of asking, why do you keep doing that? Or even asking, why do I have such a problem with you doing that? You're never going to stop. I know it keeps happening. What's wrong with me that I keep reacting to that? That's not an effective question either, because the answer is there's nothing wrong with you. You just don't have awareness of a different version of you. So you're never going to get the answer. And that's why we keep spinning and spinning and spinning. And so I just say, time out. Just stop that. Let's play a different game. So instead of why in that way, ask, where in my body could I build some circuitry so that I could be more in touch with the deep core, true, essential self with my mind, build a better bridge between my mind and this deep core, essential self, so that I'm in constant contact with what's right and true and whole. And so when I ask, where in my body could I build the circuitry to be able to be okay no matter what you do, my mind is going to go somewhere. It's going to go right here, or it's going to go to my chest. It's going to go to my gut. It's going to go low. Your mind is going to go somewhere because they are inherently built to support each other. And all we have to do is like, let them do their thing. So we ask, where? All of a sudden it's just right below your belly button for some reason. You're like, I don't know what that's all about. Or maybe it's right inside your throat or in the center of your head, or maybe it's in your heart space. It doesn't matter where, but what I teach people to do is to go there and with all of their attention and trust what just happened, to trust it, because there's a messaging, there's a language being spoken, and now you're learning the language. It's the language of the soul. It's like the way we're supposed to be operating from the inside out. Stimulus, response, not stimulus, response. Right. Let's start from in here. So I'm showing an image here that shows how the energy moves down from above our head, right down straight through the body and into the earth. It hits the earth and gets turned into a different vibrational frequency. It kind of gets stepped down for what I call human consumption into like alpha frequency has an influence on it. And then it rises up through the body, comes all the way up again and out the top of the head and cycles around the outside of the body over and over and over. It just keeps recycling and recycling and recycling. And it's constantly pouring more in from overhead, constantly hitting the earth, constantly rising up, etc. And all of that is exactly the bioenergetics of how our human system works. And here's how most people operate. That energy comes in from overhead. It comes right straight to the earth. It hits the earth in the same fashion, gets stepped down for human consumption, turns and rises back up through the body. But because we keep shutting down our gut feelings or shutting down our personal power or shutting down the value of self-love or shutting down our voice in the world or whatever it might be, the energy that's rising now has to go around these areas that are shut down or that have never even come online. They've never been awake. They've never been functioning because we were raised in an environment where you didn't have a voice or you couldn't trust yourself. And all of that wasn't a problem. It was by divine design, in my opinion, because you wanted to come here and learn how to do that. You wanted to come here and get a hold of it and awaken in these ways. So given this energy rising around all these areas that are shut down, I call them gaps in the highway, if you will, we're avoiding all these potholes on the rise. It creates a wobble of the rising energy, which creates a distortion in the energy field. Now, this person is standing inside here and looking out through a distorted energy field around them. So they automatically see a world that doesn't care, opportunities that pass them by. They don't see as something as being an invitation for them to be themselves. They just interpret it differently. And so those distortions are what have to go. So when you are triggered by something, it is because one of these areas that are these gaps or these areas that are shut down that we're trying to navigate around, it's time for you to no longer avoid them and navigate around them. It's time for you to build some circuits straight through them so that this wobbling, rising energy and the distorted energy field can become more perfected again, the way that we're truly designed to be functioning. And that's what life is offering up for us all the time. It's always giving us the opportunity to find the places within us. So if I say, where in my system could I build the circuitry to move straight through these gaps instead of going around them? My mind and my body intuitively are going to know it's right here. Come right here, right now. So if we then go to that place with all of our attention and all of the love that we can muster and anchor ourselves in the body, which is another one of the energy codes, is the anchoring code, teaching people how to get in their body and stay in their body so that these moments don't just shoot you up into your head and out of your body, and where you make kind of not so brilliant decisions and you say things you kind of regret later, and all that stuff that we have to go sweep up later. So the question is, where in my body could I live more fully that would allow me to be more capable and strong and clear when these situations arise in my life that are my edge? They're my cutting edge of evolution. These situations that we try to avoid, they're actually what are trying to further us. But we think, no, I got to maintain status quo. I'm on survival mode here. Don't mess with me. And it's like, oh no, you don't want to live in survival mode. Let's not play the survival game anymore. Let's play the abundance game and pretend for a moment that everything that's happening is actually in your favor. And it's trying to show you how to discover your wholeness that's already in there, but it's just been shut down or it's never been awakened in the first place. And a byproduct of that is the wobble comes out, the distortion removes, and all of a sudden we feel the abundance and the brilliance that we are made of. Because lastly, I'll just say this, that energy that's coming in from overhead, it's from the cosmos, it's from the universe. And really we have discovered is that the universal mind, the unified field of consciousness, compresses itself into this funnel, that energy that's coming, that hits the earth and rises up and creates this whole toric field flow. So you're made of everything. There's nothing that you're not. You're not missing anything. It's just a matter of, am I aware of it? Am I aware of all the categories, which those categories are called chakras, and all the levels of consciousness? Am I awake in all of them? Or am I independently tapping some of them some of the time? And we want them all to be integrated so that you get to operate as your whole true self. And so the energy codes are just a way for people to, oh, I got it. I get it. I can do this. I can hook them up with each other so that I'm not just powerful sometimes, and sometimes loving, and sometimes wise, and sometimes feeling connected, and sometimes feeling like a creative genius, sometimes having my voice, and sometimes being shut down, and all that. It's like we need to have access to all of those gifts all the time, whenever it's appropriate to really experience our freedom.
That was absolutely wonderful. It was brilliant. And I would love to share a story that literally happened to me yesterday to illustrate what you're talking about.
Oh, right.
I have been married for 26 years. And as we know, those who are closest to us often are the ones that trigger us the most. And there's been these little patterns with my husband that have been coming up more and more and more recently and become more and more bothersome to me. They just really get to me. And through some work that I have been doing with my chakras just in the last week, what happened yesterday, I've been a little stressed out. And that has been very evident in my energy field that's coming off of me. And my husband says to me last night, he says, Erin, I just want to talk to you about something and I don't want you to get mad about it, which is always like, oh, dear.
Oh, that's going to be good.
Prefaced it by that. And I was like, okay. So he says to me, it's kind of rolling off of you, this stress, and it's affecting me and it's affecting the kids and everything. And I didn't feel the normal trigger that I would normally feel. I didn't feel the well, that's not the way to talk to me. You could come put your arms around, like telling him how he's talking to me about it wrong or whatever that I would normally do.
Right.
And I was very aware in the moment that I was like, oh, this isn't triggering me. And yet what I did was my mind was not connected to my body. And I immediately said something that I wasn't feeling. I went back into the old pattern of saying defensive things and whatever, and watching him react to me. Oh, I knew you were going to get upset. That's why all of this. And what I had that awareness that my mind and my body were not connected. And I really kind of stopped and was like, I'm not even triggered. What am I doing? And I stopped and I literally went over to him and I put my hands on his shoulders and I said, I love you and I hear what you're saying. And I'm not upset at all. I don't know why I'm doing this. And it was the first time that I was able to be in a position where I knew historically over and over, I would have been defensive. I would have taken some issue with my husband calling me out on my stuff. And I was present enough to say, what's going on here in my body? Is there anything there for me? And then being like, this is a head game you're playing here. This is not even real. And to stop myself and go back and say, I'm in love here. I am in love, to be in this presence of love with him and say, kind of like, just kidding, but, but what you're talking about, as you said that, I became more present to what had occurred yesterday. And I hope that that's a good example of what you're talking about, or at least a way that we can look at that in that way, in a real life way, because I had so much reading down here. What's going on beneath the sensation in your body is your own evolution. That was what you just said. And the awareness of it when it's happening.
Magic.
It is magic.
We can start catching that in real time. Its days are numbered of ever controlling us again, because we're on it. And nothing's stopping me, right? Nothing's stopping me from my freedom. And so it's the way in. It's through love and reconnecting the mind and the body and the breath together.
Yes, it's the way in. I could just marinate in that for a while. So we've been talking about the physical body as a gateway, essentially, to spirit, and what's needed or what's happening for our higher self or our deeper self. Mm-hmm. And it's not a religious thing. This is a very spiritual, as in that's the reality of our spirit, that we are spirit. And for those of us who may have been raised in a more Judeo-Christian culture, or even without religion at all, or spirituality at all, this may be, how does one begin to become aware of and understand this kind of human experience we're having from a different perspective, like a perspective of a higher self, of something more than, we've talked about we're not the mind, but how does one begin to kind of wrap their mind around something that may be very different from, you're saying, like, I am the universe. I am made of all of that. And I am the I am. So how does one begin to be like, how do I allow, especially, I think you're so perfect to answer this question, coming from a scientific background, women who are brilliant, they have an analytical mind, they understand science, or they understand the way that logic works and stuff. This might not seem logical to them. How do we begin to think about this in a way that resonates with a deeper place in us?
It's interesting that when we base our lives in logic purely, there will come a point where we reach a ceiling, because the life force itself exists beyond logic. We live in logic and pray for miracles, for instance, but miracles happen beyond logic, right? Yeah. We call them miracles. We'd call them logicals, right? We wouldn't be like, oh, I predicted that. And it's like, no, it's a miracle, right? We hope for those things, right? So it's an interesting dilemma. When we depended on our strategic, analytical, linear minds that are polished for logic and have made good decisions, and it's taken us a long way. But even the most brilliant of scientists that have carved many openings for us through science in linear physics, they, at the end of their lives, say, if you think you understand, think again, because it's beyond logic. The truth is beyond. Einstein saying this, that when he's referencing the exploration of quantum science, and it's basically saying that we play a role in creating our reality, and there is a rhythm to this, there is a substance to this that literally operates at a frequency that is higher than logic. And so there's that. And given the question, I always also like to speak in terms for people who don't have a particular relationship spiritually or connectivity. It doesn't mean they're left out of the conversation. It doesn't mean they're left out of the game, or it just doesn't work for you. But I do turn attention to things like nature. What is it that makes the springtime bring forth life in ways that lie dormant in the winter. And what is it that allows the tree to know that it's time to withdraw the sap and the leaves to turn and to fall? There's something happening. And if we even just reference it as life force itself, that we're made of life force. When we exhale for the last time, we leave the body. I mean, that's evidential, right? We leave the body. So the breath has something to do with being here. And in the body, breath is spirit in the body. So when we think in terms of when we die and our spirit goes to heaven or whatever, there's something that we've been readily accepting, or that we leave the body, whether we believe in heaven or not. There are some rhythms to nature that are unfolding. And if people can just allow that to be something that they belong to, that they are a part of nature, and that nature isn't operating around me only, it's operating through me. When I eat something, it gets digested, it gets metabolized, and the process unfolds in ways that we can describe and explain. And yet we can't go into a laboratory and recreate a human being with all of the elements that are here for us. And so there is something beyond logic that we do have to admit exists. And by working with just the raw energy, we don't even ever have to use the word spirit. We can just say there is an energy, even in terms of kinetic energy and ATP and this kind of process that we might be more acclimated to. And the story still goes the same. That energy, when it is in motion and vital, it reproduces cellular activity. We know that every cell in the body is reproduced within every 7 years. And so within 7 years, we have an opportunity to really obliterate any condition in our body. So if we have something that we've had going on for more than 7 years, there's a reason for that. And it has to do with how we're routing the energy through our bodies. And science has certainly shown us that our minds have a huge effect on how that energy gets to flow or not. We can shut it down with our minds, and we can open it up with our minds. And the greatest facilitation to opening it up with our minds, in my experience clinically and working with people, has been the facilitation of moving the energy with a process similar to acupressure or acupuncture, really routing the energy through the body, but also through the infusion of love into the mix. That love mobilizes energy faster than anything. We know when we're young, when we blush with energy because somebody walked in the room and we just think they're super special, that whoosh, there's an instantaneous transformation that happens when chemistry happens. And so there are ways to describe all of it that require a little bit more length of describing the exact details. But in short, to just try to remain included in a conversation that occasionally expresses words like spirit and divine guidance. And you can take those things out and just use the word energy, and we can still get to the same bottom line. And I'll just finish by saying that quantum science has shown us that what we think about and the environment that we create for ourselves has a greater influence in our body's ability to heal and to express in wholeness and vitality, and for our minds to move toward creative genius instead of being stuck in survivorship. That we have the ability to create that for ourselves by how we use our minds. And that it creates an environment that little antennas on the surface of our cells pick up messages and then report that inside the cells and produce chemistries to match whatever's going on in our energy field, if you will. And so it isn't about genetic predisposition. It's about how are we using our faculties. And it will turn on and turn off different genetic codings within our system and allow for us to awaken and heal and transform our lives if we just learn how to use our minds in our favor instead of letting them run wild like that wild teenager that we were talking about earlier. It's not listening to anybody except its own story. Eventually, it has to sit down and drop in a little bit more.
So wonderful. So what I hear you saying, and part of this is interjecting like some of the knowledge that I already have, but we're saying the mind is designed to serve the soul, and the understanding of the use of the mind is one of the first precepts in healing. And healing does not that we're not already whole, but there's a blockage of energy flow. And so true healing, I would say, like through the revealing of truth, unlocks those energy blocks and allows the free flow of that energy, which we can call it just energy, we can call it spirit, we can call it life force, whatever that is. It allows the normal function of the human body, but also on a non-physical plane, mental, spiritual, emotional, whatever, that allows that healing to happen as well. And that's a whole nother subconscious discussion and stuff. But what I'm hearing you say is that is mastery, and that it's beyond positive affirmations, because the soul can tell an imposter, right? It is a fundamental allowing of energy to be expressed and to flow in the way that it is meant to flow. Am I getting it right?
Beautifully, beautifully put. I've been saying for years that true healing happens as a result of revealing your magnificence, is revealing your true self. Healing happens as a byproduct of that. And all that was happening, it wasn't that something was broken before, it was that our pieces and parts weren't working together. So when they integrate, when mind and body and breath come together, then there is greater power. Together they are more. And so by integrating, what happens is we reveal a greater version of ourselves when we're not just operating as the mind, but the mind and the body are working together. And then the mind and the body and the breath are working together collectively. All those distortions heal themselves as a byproduct of integration happening. And so if we put our attention on integration, healing is going to happen as a byproduct. If we put our attention on trying to heal, it makes an assumption that something's broken that we're trying to fix. And so we're off to the races trying to find this thing that's wrong when actually nothing's wrong. So you're never going to find it. It's a matter of getting yourself back together again and allowing yourself to express in your wholeness, and the distortions start disappearing. So what I was saying about this one code, that we were taking our attention to the body and asking, when we get triggered, where in my body could I build some circuitry right now to allow a greater integration to happen faster so that I could start operating on all cylinders? And a byproduct of that is healing's going to happen out of the corner of my eye. And things that I wasn't even aware of are going to be healing simultaneously. It's not just number one priority of a shoulder problem or a neck pain or a headache that I'm aware of. It's the stuff underneath that that's also getting addressed that will never have to express as a symptom, because I addressed it at the causal level. Now we're talking.
Like the house of cards, right? You found that one thing that all these other things are built off of, or pull that one card. And
yes,
you said it doesn't ever have to be expressed. You don't have to process every little thing. And I love that, because it is quantum healing.
It's not linear.
It's
everything that's
linear.
Vibrating at one vibration is going to be addressed at the same time. It's not this and then this and then this and then this. It's everything on that radio station, and then everything on this radio station, or everything on this radio station.
And what's so powerful about this, and what I mean by quantum healing, if that's a term that people are unfamiliar with, is when we talk about whether it's physical or let's say mental health, we have in our culture we go to therapy and we talk therapy and we process one thing at a time. And not that that doesn't have a place, because I believe that it does. But I think that there's not enough time in our human lifetime to process every little thing that we think, to do it in that way, and to collapse time in a way, and to concentrate healing, as you will, that you can do so much by just understanding certain principles, and just doing those certain things can really, I want to say, speed healing up, but it's not about the speed of it. It's about the quantity and the quality of that healing and that revealing of, and that movement of things. So I feel like, oh, that is so powerful. Your work is so phenomenal. I think my last question for you is, what is next for you? What's still in you that wants to be expressed? You've already done so much, and yet you're still doing this, because obviously that's your passion, that's your dharma, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And what's next for you?
Oh, thank you. To me, I'm here doing this. I'm participating in this awakening of humanity. And what my primary focus truly is reaching critical mass. And I've just devoted my life to continuing to share my father's research, my own research on top of that, the experiences that come together for me because of this access to these multiple layers of who we are and being able to weave them together. That because of all of that, I am so impassioned by sharing that information. It's sort of like when you connect the dots, the very next thing you want to do is share it. When you realize, oh, there's nothing wrong here. There's nothing missing. Here, can I show you? You're right. And it's not about me. It's about we. It's about all of us are here to do this thing. And I'm just deeply inspired to contribute to the awakening of humanity. We are transcending the limitations of just living identified as the mind, as third dimensional beings. And we're really evolving to a species that I feel, will be more driven and interested in love than in the mind just thinking alone, but using the mind to fuel the power of love is really what that relationship is supposed to be. But it hasn't been integrated and connected. And so it's off on its own, doing its thing. And it shows up as the egoic processes that we're witnessing all over the world and in every facet of humanity right now. And it's because we're in a birthing process. So what's next for me is I plan on stepping on the gas with putting the word out there and getting involved in larger projects that allow us to reach more people simultaneously in terms of film and in terms of bigger projects in that way, involving lots and lots of people. Because I know that when we are all focused on the similar vibration, and if you have TM in your past with your studies around meditation, you know that there has been research about critical mass, and it doesn't really take that many people. That percentage of the population isn't that large that needs to be focusing on this very conversation that we're having right here. And when enough of us are, the rest of us come along without even realizing the details of it. We just automatically assume it. I've witnessed it in my life. My father was a pioneer in energy medicine. He could barely get anyone to listen to him about this kind of conversation that we're having right now. And that was in the 70s. And now I was just interviewed a couple of days ago by someone probably 30 years younger than me, maybe 40 years younger than me. And he was so inspired at just the introduction of these ideas and bringing it forward. And that generation is very interested. Whereas 2 generations ago, they were like, oh, what are you talking about? It's hogwash and this kind of crazy disposition. And we're evolving. And it's so beautiful to witness it in my lifetime to the degree that it is happening. And that's very inspiring to me to want to just put my foot on the pedal and go for it, to just bring the message to as many people as possible. So I'm writing another book and I'm deep in it, and these kinds of pieces that I want to put together in all ways to reach as many people as we possibly can, because there is great answer here for everyone in their right way.
I know you and I will see each other on the path, because I think that we're up to a lot of the same things. I agree 1,000% with everything that you just said. And will you please tell us where people can find you if they're interested in learning more about the energy codes and the work that you do?
Sure. I'm pretty easy to find, but the website is drsuemorter.com, drsuemorter.com. And on there, you'll find all sorts of online courses that we're teaching and in-person events that we're doing and sacred journeys around the world to sacred sites, just utilizing the energies there and getting into the ancient traditions and teachings and translating that for everyone in very user-friendly terms and all sorts of things. We have healing courses. I have a Body Awake Yoga certified yoga school where I'm teaching people how to put their bodies in sacred positions, sacred geometries, the positions called yoga asanas, and breathe through the body at the same time in a particular way that activates the circuitry that we're speaking about here today, and all sorts of things. Practitioner training for doctors and non-doctor practitioners that would like to be of service to humanity and learn ways to do that as well. So you'll find all sorts of goodies there that you can peruse through, and info at customer service department that is very happy to answer your questions. So feel free to contact us in any way. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sue Morter. It has been an absolute honor and privilege and pleasure to have you here today.
My great joy. Thank you for what you're doing to bring these conversations together. So much love.
The Lavish Leader, Unveiling Wisdom is brought to you by Dr. Erin Martin and the Lavish Group. To find out more about Dr. Erin and how you can create and embody a lavish life for yourself, visit thelavishgroup.com. And don't forget to search for Lavish Leader in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at the Lavish Group, thanks for listening. And remember, you too can live a lavish life of fulfillment, beauty, and love.